September 27. My dear friend Makar Alexievich, Mr. Bikov says I must have 3 dozen linen chemises, so I must make haste and find seamstresses to make 2 dozen, and we have very little time. Mr. Bikov is angry and says there is a great deal of bother over these rags. Our wedding is to be in 5 days, and we are to set off the day after the wedding. Mr. Bikov is in a hurry. He says we must not waste much time over nonsense. I am worn out with all this fuss and can hardly stand on my feet. There is a terrible lot to do, and perhaps it would have been better if all this had not happened. Another thing, we have not enough net or lace, so we ought to buy some more, for Mr. Bikov says he does not want his wife to go about like a cook, and that I must simply wipe all the country ladies' noses for them. That was his own expression. So, Makar Alexievich, please apply to Madame Chiffon in Gorohovoi Street, and ask her first to send us some seamstresses, and secondly to be so good as to come herself. I am ill today. It's so cold in our new lodging, and the disorder is terrible. Mr. Bikov's aunt can hardly breathe, she is so old. I am afraid she may die before we set off, but Mr. Bikov says that it is nothing, that she'll wake up. Everything in the house is in the most awful confusion. Mr. Bikov is not living with us, so the servants are racing about in all directions, goodness knows where. Sometimes Fedora is the only one to wait on us, and Mr. Bikov's valet, who looks after everything, has disappeared no one knows where for the last 3 days. Mr. Bikov comes to see us every morning, and yesterday he beat the superintendent of the house, for which he got into trouble with the police. I have not even had anyone to take my letters to you. I am writing by post. Yes, I had almost forgotten the most important point. Tell Madame Chiffon to be sure and change the net, matching it with the pattern she had yesterday, and to come to me herself to show the new, and tell her, too, that I have changed my mind about the embroidery, that it must be done in crochet, and another thing, that the letters for the monogram on the handkerchiefs must be done in tambour stitch. Do you hear? Tambour stitch, and not satin stitch. Mind you don't forget that it is to be tambour stitch. Something else I had almost forgotten. For God's sake tell her also that the leaves on the pelerine are to be raised, and that the tendrils and thorns are to be an applique, and then the collar is to be edged with lace, or a deep frill. Please tell her, Makar Alexievich. Your V.D. P.S. I am so ashamed of worrying you with all my errands. The day before yesterday you were running about all the morning, but what can I do? There's no sort of order in the house here, and I am not well. So don't be vexed with me, Makar Alexievich. I am so miserable. Oh, how will it end, my friend, my dear, my kind Makar Alexievich? I'm afraid to look into my future. I have a presentiment of something, and am living in a sort of delirium. P.P.S. For God's sake, my friend, don't forget anything of what I have told you. I am so afraid you will make a mistake. Remember tambour, not satin stitch. V.D.